Hey, it's Will here. I'm the founder of Photography Explained, and in this live stream, we're going to be taking a look at a few 3 or more hacks that absolutely transform any landscape photo, especially from a editing standpoint. And we're going to get started with this image here from Stephen James, because this is a lovely image, although he's added a horrible border to this. So I'm just going to copy it, we're going to throw it into Photoshop, and let's take a look. Well, first thing we're going to do is get rid of this border, and then we're going to take a look at some of these editing hacks. This is a weird aspect ratio, but that is fine. So Stephen, I appreciate you submitting this into the Photography Explained Photo Review Club community. If you want me to take a look at your images moving forward, just drop them in the Facebook group. We'll head over there in a minute and take a look. Well, the first thing that transforms an image like this, which is a great image, like, respect to Stephen, this is already a lovely image. I think it says from Australia in the bottom corner down there, is it's all a bit flat. And something that I add regularly with sunset, sunrise photos that I see people not doing very often in the Facebook group is just adding a vignette to it. And we don't have to go crazy with this. I'm just going to create a mask. I'm going to invert the mask. I'm going to pull back the exposure. And as I've done that, the image now overall globally can be pulled up. Go back to the mask. We can just adjust this. It doesn't have to be in the center of the frame. As you can see, if it's in the center of the frame, the bottom half of the image looks a bit darker. So we just pull it down. We just pull this in. And what we're trying to do here is add this photo in general needs contrast. So we're darkening parts of it, but we're also just trying to pull the viewer towards the center of the frame. So got the vignette, it's all quite flat. With the vignette, we're all sucked in towards the center of the frame. So that's the first hack. I don't know why people don't do this more often. For me, not every time, but a lot of the time, it works really well. Just going to rebalance the crop of this slightly, just a little bit top heavy potentially. A side quest hack here is zooming all the way out and zooming all the way in as you're viewing your image. So again, just a little bit top heavy. Now we're cutting off the boats either side here, which I don't really want to do, right? So we'll just change our aspect ratio slightly. So I typed the wrong numbers in. 3, 2. Just going to crop off a little bit more without chopping off these boats. Fine. So we're getting closer. So the first hack is a vignette. So crazy how much of a difference that can make. Now, the next thing with this image is it has some depth, but not a lot of depth. So if I just select my brush and we select a color that we can see, you can see that this part of the image here is brighter than this part of the image, as it would be, because there is a level of atmospheric haze as we go further back into the image itself. Now, with that said, we've just added a vignette around here, so it probably wasn't dissimilar. So something that I think for an image like this we can consider is softening the back end of this image here. So I'm just going to select a radial gradient. I'm going to feather the heck out of it. And I'm just going to add a little bit of negative dehaze just to soften it. What it's also doing there is softening around the sunlight as well. And as I do that, I'm also going to increase just globally the contrast in this scene. And already that gives it way more pop. I'm just going to globally increase the exposure, kind of nailing the bottom. The bottom of the image is a little bit too dark, I think. So I'm just going to raise our shadows to the bottom part of the frame. There we go. So again, just a little bit of haze in the middle to give us that depth, and I brighten the bottom part and a little bit more contrast. And that's the transformation that we've had right there. So that's the second hack. First hack, vignettes, especially for sunset, sunrise images. Then add some depth. Then sharpness. And sharpness, not globally, right? So clouds are soft and fluffy because they're a gazillion miles away. Like, I know if you add clarity to a cloud, it looks epic. It makes it look more stormy. But typically, if I want to add some drama to the sky, I'm going to use a linear gradient like that. And I'm just going to add a curve to it. So again, we're subtly pushing and pulling the contrast, but we're doing it in a way that is gentle. So I don't know if this image needs that specifically, but that's how I would do it rather than adding loads of contrast or clarity. But the center of this frame here absolutely can have some clarity. And the reason for the clarity is that here it was going to drag our attention again to the center of the frame. Because I don't really care if these trees in the background or on the side, people are viewing them. Maybe I care a little bit about these reeds in the foreground. Provide some clarity here. It makes it look more real as well. I mean, that's a lot of clarity. We are working with a JPEG here, so we're perhaps pushing this a little bit further than we would otherwise. But again, the difference is quite stark, and I feel I want to soften the light around there. So a couple of ways to go about doing this. One of the ways to go about doing it is if we open Luminar Neo. It's all a bit gentle, right? And it shouldn't be. It should be fiery. It should be, aggressive might be the wrong word to use, but so what I'm going to do here is add the glow effect. So I'm going to create a radial gradient. So basically a band of this where the light is. We might have gone a bit over the top with that. We will see. Go to glow. Just going to increase that glow. Not really doing much for us that. Maybe soft focus. Yeah, the soft focus is doing the job. Maybe a bit aggressive. And I think we could now, at this point, just double down on the contrast across the entirety of the scene. But there are your 3 hacks. Vignette, adding atmospheric haze for depth, and then adding sharpness where we want the eye to go as opposed to doing it globally. So we'll let this wrap up if it's going to. Come on, Luminar. And if it's going to faff around, we'll cancel it. That is fine. So again, becomes much more bold, strong image there, just with a handful of small tweaks. So here's the original image, and I appreciate you, Stephen, for firing it into the Landscape Photo Feedback Photography Explained Community Photo Review Club, longest name of all time. Right. Cool. Let's look through a couple more of these images, and we'll give feedback where it is warranted. So this image from Chenki. Problem with this image is there's not really much going on. This is a snapshot rather than like a landscape photo. I would suggest, right? If I humbly may suggest that. I mean, there's pattern, there's repetition between the 2 sheep looking up and one in the middle. You don't always have to have things balanced in the center of the frame. I just feel like there's just a lot of sky. People like to put a lot of sky in when the sky isn't warranted. This probably would be better with a really pano kind of crop, but good effort regardless. Here is a lovely image. Another one from Stephen. Good man. Again, there's not enough contrast in this, Stephen. The black of the darkest parts down here is quite black, but the backside of whatever this is, so there's people queuing up to do something here, the backside of this could be a lot darker. But you've got a nice glowing sun, which is cool. Good shot. Here we have the legend Eugene. Okay, let's take a look at this one, because immediately what strikes me is you've completely blown out the front of this house. You've annihilated it. There is bricks here, and there are no bricks there. So it looks like you've not protected your highlights, even though the shot itself is quite dark. So I assume you've accidentally overexposed it, but then pulled it back down in post. So I'd have a think about, it almost looks like a whitewashed building, but obviously you can see the front of it there. So that's your feedback on this. Also, I think your color balance is probably a little bit off, because that white looks not very white. So I'd knock the color balance back a bit. You could probably just increase your shadows a little bit here as well, just to... In fact, if you hadn't blown out the house, you could probably just increase the whole thing up a little bit more. And depends if you're trying to be accurate or not, but I would imagine that house was not kind of orange when you took the image. But Eugene, you spend a lot of time in the group, so I appreciate it, mate. And feedback, Katie asking for feedback on the A7R5, which is what I shoot with as well. It's a beast of a camera, better for landscapes, nothing close in the price range. I have been considering going all fancy, looking at GFX system. Numerous reasons, some of which may materialize on the YouTube channel at some point in the not too distant future. But yeah, I use the A7R5, and it's probably the best landscape camera when you tie into the fact, the size of it, the weight of it, the size and the weight of the lenses. I don't think anyone needs more than 60 megapixels, because you just do a series of shots and stitch them together, right? Another shot from Eugene in the Dolomites. Nice. I think you just need better conditions here. Either a perfectly flat lake or some drama in the sky. Eugene, I will not go through all of them. Just a quick note, as it's just here in front of us, I'm running a live webinar tomorrow. If you head over to Photography Explained /webinar, you'll see, this is the page that you land on. You see it's going to be 23 hours, 47 minutes from now, so 6 p.m. UK time. And we'll go for about an hour or so. So about 30, 40 minutes of content, some free training, and then I'll do a Q&A at the end. So if you've got questions, you can type your questions away and I will answer them, or do my best to answer them. And I'm going to be explaining literally how I went from taking snapshots, terrible landscape photos, just a handful of years ago. These are the shots I was taking. These are the same locations, there or thereabouts, and how I'm now taking professional level images by just following a series of steps. There's literally no rocket science to anything but the upper echelons of landscape photography, where you're in the jungle for 3 weeks. Sure, you're not following a series of steps to achieve shots like that. But for this shot up at Catbells in the UK, and this shot in Buttermere in the Lake District in the UK, it is just frameworks. It's just following a step-by-step process, and you can create beautiful photos like these. So if you want to check it out, head over to photographyexplained.com/webinar, and it's completely free. There's the only thing I will say is it can only hold 100 people live in the webinar room, and there are more than 100 people that have signed up. So not everyone who's signed up will turn up on the time it starts, I'm sure. But make sure that if you're interested, you want to spend some time with me tomorrow, don't delay, because you won't be able to get in there, basically. Because I'm too tight to pay for the next tier of webinar host, which holds 1,000 people. Because I don't think we'll be getting 1,000 people in anytime soon. So there you go. That is the webinar. The webinar pitched, well and truly pitched. Here we have an image from Wilfred. Whoa. What is happening here? The trails ended up broken. Taken with a D4, it's built-in interval shooting function. Yeah. Not sure this one worked, Wilfred, but I appreciate you sharing. So if anyone has had this issue before, the Wilfred answer is there. Cool. Naresh. Okay, let's take a look at this image, because this is a lovely composition and shot, and not ideal editing. So this might be of value for you. Cool. Right, so a couple of things here. Immediately as I look at the image, it looks green. So we could probably stick a bit of magenta in it. The next thing is you've got these halos, these white borders going across your mountaintops. And that's because you have pulled down the sky. And the sky looks a bit weird anyway, but we'll come back to that. You pulled down, you've selected the sky and pulled it down, but the top of the mountains weren't selected, or there was no subtle gradient over the top of the mountains. It was a hard edge. What that means is then this white bit is actually the color of the sky, and this is what you've darkened it to. So it leaves these halos. So we'll take a look at that. You've also got these halos on these mountains. You've got this patch of yellow, but then the shot itself isn't really a sunrise or sunset shot. And then you've got this massive patch of green haze that is distracting as well. What it looks like is 3 images thrown on top of each other, and it all looks a little bit odd. Even these trees look odd here. I'm just going to go back to the group a second. Let's see what other people are saying. So foreground would have been cool. Nice photo, river sublime. For me, you nailed it. I can't really think of anything to make it better. Twigs in the bottom corner ruin it. Loads of comments on this one, which is great. You raise your shadows too much, lowering the contrast. Yep. Framing and composition, random video shared. Fine. So my thoughts. Let's throw it into camera raw. So first thing, color-wise, you got a rainbow over here as well. So I don't know if you've done you've also got this masking messing around here. I don't know if you've done a sky swap or something with this, but something is fishy, something is off. Pull back the green and get a bit more magenta. If it was a warm day, that golden light's got to come from somewhere. So we're probably looking a bit more. Probably a bit more like that, right? So that's probably a little bit magenta. Now, the more I look at it, the more issues I have, right? So the first thing is you want to pull the shadows back all the way. I mean, exposure even. We're just massively lacking contrast. I think the sky is either a sky swap or you've just, it's just the wrong color. So let's go to color. Because you can't have yellow light like this, but white on the clouds. That's the first thing I'd be doing. I'd be, as someone else said, removing these branches from the bottom corner. I'd be looking at this here and doing something about that light green. So if we go to color pointer, select the light green, we just pull the luminance of it down. That does half the job there. We're just trying to match it with the background a little bit. I'm just going to pull my highlights down as well. So there we go. So we've mostly got rid of that background. Now, with the halos, without the raw file and starting this again, basically you've got to paint them in, which I'm not going to do because that'll take ages and it won't be the most interesting piece of content of all time. But even pulling the eye towards the center of the frame of a vignette here, it's not as useful because it's quite a bright scene versus the other shot was more dramatic in and of itself. But you see how it's starting to look a little bit more golden hour-ish now. And if that light was truly there, the golden light, then it should look like golden hour. So that's where we're at. I think that'll do for this one. I think if I had the raw file, we could spend a bit more time here, but there's just some weirdness to the image. But it's an epic location. If this is not been manipulated too much, this is a really cool location. So I'll give you that. I'll give you that, Naresh. Cool. We will jump on to the next one. Here we have John. So I think, John, if your composition is the issue here. If you're going to be, you're almost like not quite on top of these posts at the front, but then your subject, the theatre, is like you're underneath it. Maybe I'd pick one or the other, or I'd come over to these smaller posts and use them to frame up the theatre. Because these lines don't really lead anywhere. They almost lead me out of the frame rather than into it. Whereas these lines, like if you were stood here, these could come across these posts, whatever they are, and perhaps drive us towards the theatre. But I think the main issue you're going to have here is you're so low down and the theatre is so high that you are, like, the perspective is just a bit uncomfortable. I'm like, as I'm looking at the photo, I'm like craning up to look at what's going on. Cool. Pete, I would consider this more of a snapshot rather than a landscape photo, if I am being honest. But another example of an image where a vignette would probably set off the image a little bit. It's all just a bit flat, which is fine. You know, if you knew this person or they were just off to go murder someone, and this was more of a cinematic shot, then yeah, maybe it would work. But for me, right now, it's more of just a picture I took on my iPhone, or I'd take on my iPhone. Let's take a look at this one. Right. What is, anyone who's in the chat, what is the issue that cannot be unseen with this photo? Bonus points for anyone in the chat who can provide a satisfactory answer. And it's not this person. This person's not ideal. The boat's not ideal. It's a lovely, in fact, it would be a better photo perhaps about those two, a bit more interesting and abstract. Shiraz gets it right in the chat. That horizon is wonky. Right. Wonky AF. So immediately the image looks more managed, more interesting, and now I can see. Now I can just look at the image as opposed to being distressed by the wonky horizon, especially when it's the ocean, which is you might see some curvature of the earth if you depending on the perspective of the angle you're looking at, or the size, the angle of view you're looking at on your lens. Other than that, it should be pretty damn straight. So now there's a bit of a story. These folks are driving off to this bunch of rocks. This person was too late. He didn't get there on time. That's a real shame. But yeah, again, more of like a travel photo than a landscape photo. But I appreciate the effort, Oren, nevertheless. Nice. Here, Dave's got the money. The line is just slightly perceptibly not level. You could fix this in Photoshop. Cool. David Park. Okay, 2 issues. Number 1, the foreground is just too dominant. There's just too much stuff, which is a shame because there was loads of foreground interest here that you could have framed up, and instead you framed up a lump of dirt, like grass, right? So, obviously, where is this? Mount Cook National Park, New Zealand. Fine. So amazing view. Obviously, it's stunning. I don't know if this is a stream. Obviously, this must be like a glacial pathway at some point in time. But I'd be getting up on top of these rocks. I'd be looking down at the rocks to find a rock or a series of rocks or a group of rocks that's pointing in the direction that I want my my viewer to look, which is going to be the bottom of this stream or river. And then the river is going to do all the hard work and drag the viewer's eye towards into the frame, into the mountains. And what you've got here is just a really ugly piece of grass. And my eye just stops. It just hits these series of rocks and just stops. So get up on here, have a look for these rocks. And then a piece of advice that Dem, he's a world-class landscape photographer based in the Peak District. He's been I featured him on some of his content on my channel a bunch of times at this point. But something he said to me that really stuck with me was, because I was taking a picture of a foreground rock and he came over and shaking his head. And he was like, I will tell you exactly what he said. But the metaphor the metaphor that he used was, or the analogy, simile, one of the three that he used was, if that rock was in your back garden, would it be an interesting rock? And the answer was no. So now I will only look for rocks that if they were in my back garden, they'd be interesting. And that to me has been, I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's been an absolute massive help for me finding foregrounds in environments like this. Because if that patch of grass was in your garden, you'd probably be trying to dig it up and plant something in it. Versus some of these rocks, probably some interesting shapes, you've got some cool colors. So the very first thing is foreground interest. We want to pull the viewer in, and just have to every single time, but 9 times out of 10, it's also going to give us the lines, the shape, the pattern to push the viewer towards the rest of the image. And then obviously the other criticism you'll be able to guess a million miles away is just midday with no atmospherics, no interesting conditions. So I'm sure if you were stood there, it'd be absolutely bloody beautiful, be glorious. But as an image, it doesn't work. So hopefully that's useful, David. Because if you live in New Zealand, you can get up here. You have the cheat code. You've won. Just spend some time up here, and inevitably you'll come out with some amazing shots. Another one from David, even more so. New Zealand is more mountainous than, these are quite pointy mountains. This almost looks like the like Switzerland. Yeah, I think you got to look right. So this is a much better composition. You're doing a great job with that. I would just clone out the road sign that's behind this statue, and then shoot this at sunset or sunrise with a big old sun somewhere towards the center of the frame here. Banging photo, class. But yeah, otherwise it's a bit generic otherwise. Cool. Marco. So I am not a fan of people being in landscape shots. I know there are some YouTubers where that's their thing. I get it, why they do it. And I think in this instance, there's two people. The other person ruins it. I take it back. The one person here is interesting because it gives this scale, because this could be big, small, we don't really know. The second person climbing, I'd clone them out. And other than that, it's just weather conditions. I think you've clipped some of the highlights down here, but I'd pull it all down. I would dodge and burn it because this is all very flat, because it's just the sun's hitting that face at this moment in time. But yeah, if you live anywhere near here, it's crazy interesting. As I assume this is like lava that's relatively recent lava that is cooled down quite quickly, leaving these kind of shapes. But yeah, it's really cool. Relatively, as in like the past 100,000 years or whatever it is. Cool. Tim. Nice. I really like this. I think a squarer crop might do this a favor. If we just fake a little bit of space at the top of the frame, maybe. Use some. Oh, every time I get that wrong. Content at word fill. Always choose the wrong one. Yeah, I think that's a stronger composition. And then, is it straight? No, just a little bit off. Fine. I'll just crop that little bit at the top and the bottom. But it's a lovely shot to find this. So I think that's a stronger composition with the square crop. I'd probably pull back the highlight. I won't be able to do it because we've only got the raw file here now, but I'd probably pull down the highlights in the bottom half of the frame here. Because are they like blisteringly white when the sky is grey? Probably not. And so my eye's just a little bit too drawn to them. So, something subtle. Just pulling down the highlights a little bit. I mean, were they clipping before? Nope. So I do that. I just wonder if darkening down the top of the sky, just to stop my eyes shooting out the top of the frame so much. Just a little bit, just almost like a bit more mood to it. So this is an artistic choice. You could decide what you think on that one for sure. But that's what I'd be considering. But otherwise, like wonderful composition, obviously. Wonderful composition. These, even where you're stood, I think there was a photo last week that I was giving feedback on. And if the photographer just stood a few foot over to the right, it was. So these lines are going more towards the subject. You are forced to do this because you want the perspective straight on in front of the building. But yeah, I think that is a stronger shot than this with you're too close to the top of the frame there with this. I mean, I was cropped out that building at the side there. It's not quite as derelict and awkward looking if there's a brand new building on the side. So yeah, but lovely shot. I think it's really cool. The other thing you could do is probably add a bit of a curve to it and really push the contrast. The contrast could be pushed a lot more in this scene. Other than that, I could see that in some kind of book of, whatever this is, or the local area, something like that. So who was that? That was Tim. Good work, Tim. Nice one. Cool. Another one from Tim. Yes, it does qualify as a landscape shot, but that is not as strong as your previous one. Another one from Tim. Randy. Skogafoss in deep winter. I think the sky is letting you down here. It's just the sky's too bright and not blue. If the water is that color and the ice is all brown, then the sky's not going to be blue. You can definitely denoise this as well. Nice, you've left the raw file there. I might take a look at this later on. I won't do the raw file now. But yeah, anyone who does want extra feedback on their images, if you upload the raw file to Google Drive and share the link, me or other people in the group can also take a look at the raw file and push these things a little bit further. But yeah, basically you pulled down the brights in the sky too much, added all this noise. And just the edge there, you got the dark contrast. I think basically the top of the frame is too much color. I rambled for too long. Now I've got to try to do something about it. You just want to take some of the blue out of this, basically. So we go to point color. We'll find that blue, and we'll just reduce saturation. So now we're getting closer. Denoise that as well if you feel so inclined. But you see here we've got a massive gap on the histogram. If it'll let me drag it over, well, let me drag it further. You've got a massive gap on the histogram. Under there, where my mouse pointer is, it should be black. In there, it should be black. And it's not. And so I'm going to go to the curve. I'm going to pull our black point down. And so you can see on the histogram there, these bits, maybe not clipping, but should be close to clipping. And you've got a bit of a gap with the white point. We're just adding contrast as we do that now. But it's all very brown. Would ice in a situation like this be brown? I'm not sure. I think it'd probably be a bit colder, like figuratively and literally. So I think it'd probably look a bit more like that, right? I mean, the issue with some of this is a beautiful location, and I certainly wasn't there, so I can't say too much. But I would imagine it would look more like this than kind of brown. And if it was brown, it certainly wouldn't have a blue sky. So those thoughts. Just cool it off, get the black elements of it actually black rather than them just hanging around in the middle. Cool, but lovely location. There we go. Very fancy GFX 100 S2. Might be something that is getting considered. Nice. Oran. The issue is here, you weren't brave enough. You didn't get close enough to this edge. But you can't. Yeah, well, you do what you like. I would not have just a sliver of something at the bottom of the frame and then nothing at the top, which is a shame because you got a beautiful sunset, you got nice light beams coming down, and you needed to get just a bit braver, just get a bit close to the edge, and just hustle your camera over it. Is there any other thoughts here? I wouldn't crop the cliff tops. Initially, my eyes pulled to the lighthouse. Great contrast. What's Oren saying? It's probably a great idea. The concrete on the edge. The concrete was at the edge of the cliff above the lighthouse. Use it to frame the lighthouse. Add depth to the image. Yeah, I think if your image was a pano on the bottom fifth or sixth of the frame, your reasoning would make sense. But you've just got this massive area of nothing in the middle and a beautiful sky. So even just sitting on the edge of this, so you're even less likely to fall off, and trying to shoot the lighthouse would probably be the one. But yeah, cool location, absolutely. Right, Seth got this photo during the ice storm here in Nashville. The ice storm that I hear caused all kinds of issues. What could I have done better in this photo? So before you take the photo, unless it's you're doing street photography or something where you're very much kind of reacting to what's around you, landscape photos, typically you've got a bit of time, right, to ponder on things. I'd be asking myself, what am I trying to achieve? Because I'm looking at this and I see two bushes and then I can't see the rest of it because it's all blurred out. So from a technical perspective, you don't really want this branch crossing over the electricity pole there. Really want some depth of field because probably these trees here that are all frozen are quite interesting, and there's obviously stuff going on in the background. So, and the very front of the image is out of focus as well, which can sometimes be fine because it forces us to jump past it and get into the shot. But yeah, I would be thinking before I take the image, what is the goal? What's the point? If I show this to someone, what do I want them to, if you want to be all arty about it, what do I want to make them feel? If not, how do I deliver some kind of visual pleasure to them so that they want to consume the image? And for me, there's not really much here for me. So I appreciate the submission, Seth, but a bit of a miss maybe. So throw some more images in there. Let's take a look. Cool. VR Hatfield photography. I don't know what this is. This looks like this is really odd and spooky. This is a cast iron monument on the edge of what looks like a bit of a manky waterfall, and with absolutely zero context as to what's going on, or not an actual person's name, even as it's been delivered. Now, be critical of the feedback. I think it's wonky. I think that's the first thing we can definitely deal with. It's definitely wonky, and you can definitely have more contrast in this. But other than that, this is probably the weirdest photo that's ever been posted in the Photography Explained landscape photography community. I actually saw this the other day because every day, or at least every 2 days, I go through and delete every photo that isn't a landscape, basically. I saw this one. I was like, I cannot possibly delete this because this needs to be shared on the live stream for people to appreciate the weirdness of life. Now, it could very well be that there's a reason for this and there's a story behind it, and it's some famous local landmark that means something to a lot of people. But for me, outside in with zero description, not sure what I'm expected to do with this one, which is great. Cool. Another one from Chenki. So we got 2 exposures blended over and over. One of a middle-aged woman running, and then a bridge. Is this 3 exposures? It might be 3 exposures. I was out shooting on Saturday in Lancashire, and I spotted this old train bridge, which I thought had character. Just happened to be a park run going nearby. The power of editing, I composed my very first double exposure. What do you think of it? I think it's a nice attempt at creating something interesting, but the aesthetically is not very pleasing. I mean, that's fair to say. I mean, even just the lady, I would have just waited a bit longer, got someone running in the middle of the path, for example. But it's cool. This is the kind of thing that you do this for 6 months and you end up with a photo that is awesome. And then everyone's asking you how you came up with it. And the answer that you won't give, but probably should give, is I failed for 6 months and then created something really cool. So if you find this interesting, I'd encourage you to do more of it. Is it a landscape shot? I do not know. I'm not sure. But yeah, I appreciate the effort, and also I don't think I've ever done this ever. So yeah, there you go. Okay, here we go. David Dunlap. Now, if I put an image on the screen and I shut up for a second, it's probably a decent image, and I'm paying attention to it, right? David's saying, while I tend to concentrate on photographing things related to the coal industry, Douglas Falls is local to a few defunct coal mining communities. You're mentioning that you weren't able to show the scale there. I think the scale is shown. Those rocks in the foreground they're obviously big rocks as opposed to small rocks that you're close to. So I think you've done a good job with that. The critiques I have for you is, this is really common with waterfalls, I think you've just too long. It doesn't look real. Now, you might be able to save it a little bit with the actual raw file. I just paint onto here a little bit. There probably is some detail in there, in which case some clarity can sometimes bring out some of those lines and a bit of dehaze. But it's almost looks like horse hair, like over the back of a horse's neck. I think you've had your shutter open for just a little bit too long. Similarly here in the foreground, we can probably brush some of that. We'll use the same brush. Are we getting anything there? Maybe a little. What I want when I do this with a waterfall is I want to smooth out the foam and all the crap that's falling over it. And I want to create lines, and I want this whirlpool to have lines going up and then up and up and up and over to the end point of the shot. So I think you just had your shutter speed open just a wee bit too long. Fine, end of the world, is what it is. The other thing that is like really distracting, which is a shame, because if you live near this, I would go back to this. I mean, this is a really good composition. I think you've done a great shot here. Maybe you can leave a little bit more room at the bottom of the frame, just a tiny bit. I mean, if you cropped off, like on my screen, 1 centimeter and added 1 centimeter to the bottom of the frame, I think you could absolutely do that. Obviously, tilt the camera down a little bit. But the issue you've got is like these branches moving. And we had this in the landscape mastery community literally last week. We were talking about this on the group coaching call. One of the lads in the ad has a similarly, really, I actually really liked it. I had a good go at editing it myself because I really enjoyed the image. He had a waterfall shot where he'd done a slow shutter speed for the water. And because of that, some of the leaves had moved around. He got blurry leaves in his foreground. So the answer to that is dead simple, because you're already on a tripod to do the slow shutter. You're already faffing around with things. Just do your slow shutter for the waterfall and then do a fast shutter speed to freeze the leaves. And then you're just going to blend them together in Photoshop. Just use a masking layer. I mean, I'll just show you now. If I just duplicate this layer, I just go to camera raw, I'll just reduce the saturation. Let's go black and white so you can see the difference between two. It's got 2 layers. All we're going to do is add a layer mask to this top layer. So if the layer mask is white, it's basically a hole. We can see through the layer. If I press Control I, it turns the layer mask black, and now it's blocked. So black for blocked. So as you can see, that top layer, you can't see it. But if I draw white onto the mask here, I'm going to do this very, very roughly, right? So let's say the bottom frame was the smooth water and the top frame was the sharp leaves. I would just come in here with a white brush, and I'd brush over and I'd brush in all the areas where my leaves were not sharp. So down here, maybe there's some over here. And so that's masking, right? And that's how you combine your slow shutter speed for the waterfall with sharp everything else. And you don't have to do that. There are plenty of shots where a little bit of movement or even a lot of movement can add like dynamism to the scene and make it more interesting. But in this one in particular, because it's quite a pretty shot, I think doubling down and taking the 2 exposures would have been a big win here. Otherwise, though, again, love the composition. Maybe there's a little bit too much on this side. Maybe if you stood just slightly further to the right and turned, you could just cut off a little bit of this dead space on the side of the frame. But yeah, I'm nitpicking at that point. It's just the leaves and then too much motion blur, I think, is the thing to work on. Cool. Some comments. Sarah says, hello from Yorkshire. Hello, Sarah in Yorkshire. Mustafa says, can you critique my photo, please? I can, mate. I've got to find it. Drop me a message, mate, as to whether was it uploaded before the 27th of January or after the 27th of January? And we'll take a look. So another waterfall shot here. So this is more along the lines of the amount of motion blur in the water that I prefer. So there's at least a little bit of line and texture. Maybe this one could be slightly longer, so it looks less like gunk kind of. The bottom part there is perfect. The top part is a little bit too short. But it's nice. The only thing I'd think about with this, and I've shared this a bunch of times, and it's definitely cheating, but I'd be using the clone stamp here just to clone stamp in, clone stamp out. And obviously I did it very quick and it isn't working very well, but clone stamp out the highlights or the gaps in that now looks really enclosed and is absolutely, as we're going to at the top of the call, this is now a good candidate for a vignette. Just to pull the viewer towards the center of the frame, probably around here. There we go. So we want the vignette at least on covering these 2 rocks there. And then color-wise, there we go, a bit more neutral. I'm just going to push the highlights just a little bit. And I'm going to just brighten this bottom part here, just general exposure. Cool. So that's what I'd be looking at with an image like this. Probably just bit more vibrant as well. But that's a lovely image, lovely composition, these big boulders. You almost got triple waterfall here. You got one section, up another section and a midsection. This branch is a bit of a problem, but not much you can do if there's a big old branch going across your screen. But yeah, before, after, that's what I'd be thinking for a waterfall shot like that. Mustafa says, image taken on the 24th of Jan. We might have covered it last week, mate, because 24th was a good while ago. What time are we on? How long have we been going for? Who knows? I've no idea what time we got started. But we'll hang out for another few minutes. We'll cycle through some of these. We'll try and find Mustafa's image. This is lovely, but just massively overcooked. Just pull back the contrast in that one. Similar with this one. Some nice images. I think for a lot of landscape photographers and anyone who's keen enough, to take out a 5D and go out for a sunset like this, your best bang for buck is just to learn to edit. This is an interesting shot. Ants and dunes from Oren. Please provide feedback. Thanks. It's nice. Here's a nice shot of Douglas where this was like the Peak District or something. No feedback. The issue here is these trees in the middle overlapping with this tree here. There's definitely a way to shoot this probably further back, slightly lower down, so that these trees aren't intersecting. But nice colors. So this is like the difference between us, like mere mortal landscape photographers, and then people who've got access to location like this. There is no waterfall in the UK that is anywhere near as epic as this. This is a lovely photo. It's lovely. The composition is lovely as well. I think with a better edit, because you've got a similar kind of thing. You've got haloing around the edges here, where you've dramatically reduced the exposure of the sky, or the brightness of the sky, if we're being technically correct. So you'll be careful with that. But yeah, absolutely epic location. Okay, Mustafa, is it this image here? Because this is not a landscape photo. That was a. I will give you some feedback. But this is not what I was expecting. Right. The interesting bit of this image is not all these like random shops. It is this line coming around and going off over there. So I wonder if cropping this. I wonder if there's a crop here, something more like that. You've got quite a lot of dead space up there, though. And it becomes a little bit more abstract. I wonder if that's the shot. Do something about reducing the brightness of these buildings here, because they don't really need to exist, essentially. But if we open it up, I think because it is dark, these areas should be black. So we can pull down our black point just a little bit. There's not much going on in the mid. I mean, if we brighten it up too much, we can just see too much of what's going on, right? So perhaps something more like that. You probably want to add a bunch more vibrance, because, again, the colors are what's interesting. If you could shoot this at an angle where you didn't have these buildings in, then it becomes really interesting, because then it's almost like, it looks like a racetrack, one of the Formula One city racetracks. It looks like veins or arteries. It looks like strips of neon lights. I think you're also probably a bit wonky, which could just be the perspective on a shot like this from a very wide angle lens. When we're cropping in and manipulating it, we can get the perspective all messed up. And then I'd be thinking, are these lights supposed to be white? In which case our color temperature is way off. There we go, that's better. So you see how just go from muddy yellow to more white there. Obviously you push it further if you wanted, but so yeah, I'd just be thinking, can we kind of mask out some of this? Just pull down the highlights, maybe. Can't really do much, I don't think. Just dull it down enough that it becomes not the kind of like center point for attention, which it is kind of right now, without it looking weird, right? That's kind of what we're aiming for. But compositionally, a shot like this, I think, is quite cool. It's not quite what you came here for, but that's what you're getting. I think a shot like that, especially, so if you zoom out, this is the kind of experiment that, or the test I had to do. If I zoom out, does it still look interesting? So when I zoom out, I think that's a really interesting series of shapes and patterns. Zoomed in, this building like ruins it for me. So if you've got access to this, maybe this is on a big bridge on the side of a road or something, I would be cropping in, I'd be playing around, I'd be, so with my camera, I'd be, look, is there like a series of shapes that doesn't quite do it, but is there a series of shapes here that are interesting in and of themselves? And then you build then you potentially build some really nice abstract shots from this. So a bit more like that. So let's do some fill at the bottom. But something like that becomes a really interesting shot then. It's obviously done a terrible generative fill at the bottom of the frame. But that's what I'd be thinking of if I was you. Just because this is just a, if you're going to shoot a city, shoot the city. I think that's probably the advice. Tony's saying, what is the subject? Good leading lines. What are they supposed to lead the eye to? Yeah. Cool. Nice one. So with that, we will wrap things up there. If you want to see your images get both praised and torn apart by me as gently as I possibly can, you can submit them for free. No strings attached, very literally at this point, to the Photography Explained Photo Review Club Facebook page. You don't have to do anything to join, just join the group and submit an image. And just a final reminder, the webinar that I'm running tomorrow, I'm just going to tell bit of a story, but also very practical. It starts with a story and a few practical tips of how I went from taking snapshots, which some of the images that we've seen in today's live stream are a little bit snapshotty, how I went from that to high level, professional level landscape images with just a few steps, a few frameworks, a few processes. It's really not that hard. I'm here to tell you landscape photography, unless again, you're absolutely the elite of the elite, different game. But if you want some lovely pictures to be able to hang up in your home, if you want to be able to take images that make your friends and family go, bloody hell, it's pretty good that, or even take a series of images that your kids or your grandkids, they get passed on and that becomes a little bit of your legacy over time, then check out the webinar. And yeah, I will see you on tomorrow. And obviously the webinar is live, so there'll be a Q&A section at the end of that as well. Right, we'll wrap things up there. I appreciate